$1 billion annually in 5 years, $3 billion annually in 10 years of exports. Korean capital, U.S. markets, Russian resources. Episode 32. North Korea Fisheries Strategy. Creating the miracle on the Taedong River. North Korea's Workers' Party can do a market economy. Following North Korea's denuclearization, the fisheries industry is a realistic top priority, with the goal of achieving annual seafood exports of $1 billion within 5 years and $3 billion within 10 years. North Korea must combine South Korean capital, U.S. markets, and Russian resources into a single basket called the fisheries industry. In particular, the best-case scenario involves developing the West Coast Greenbelt connecting Haeju, Ongjin, and Gangnyeong, and the East Coast Blue Belt connecting Rason, Chongjin, and Wonsan as the two main axes. This would elevate North Korea from a mere source of raw materials into a center for seafood processing and distribution in Northeast Asia. The seas under North Korea's jurisdiction are completely separated into the East Sea and the West Sea. The major fish species in the East Sea are cold water species such as pollock, herring, flounder, and sweetfish, and warm water species such as sardines, anchovies, saury, and needlefish. The West Sea is home to a large number of species, including cod, hairtail, mackerel, gizzard shad, sea bream, flounder, and skate, as well as seaweed such as laver and kelp, and shellfish such as manila clams, oysters, and razor clams. According to North Korean data, the useful aquatic animals and plants targeted for fisheries amount to a total of 120 species, comprising 75 species of fish, 20 species of shellfish, 15 species of seaweed, and about 10 other species. The southern part of the West Sea, including Gangnyeong County, and the northern part of the East Sea, including Rason, are natural habitats for top-quality aquatic resources such as sea cucumbers, scallops, and abalone. Since the late 1990s, North Korea's fisheries production has remained at 630,000 tons, falling below 1960s levels and amounting to only 20% of South Korea's. Wild catches account for approximately 200,000 to 300,000 tons, with the remainder consisting mainly of farmed seaweed, laver, and oysters. This is because normal fishing operations have been difficult due to the depletion of pollock and sardine resources and shortages of fuel and fishing materials caused by economic hardship. Currently, the core issue facing North Korea's fisheries industry is a complex crisis characterized by the simultaneous existence of 4 bottlenecks: a shortage of fuel for fishing vessels, the collapse of refrigeration and storage facilities, the obsolescence of fishing gear, and the complete lack of processing and distribution infrastructure. Under sanctions, North Korea has illegally sold large-scale fishing rights in the East Sea to Chinese vessels to secure foreign currency. In this process, Chinese vessels have engaged in unlimited overfishing of marine resources within North Korea's exclusive economic zone EEZ, leading to a sharp decline in the resources of high-value species such as pollock. One of the first tasks to be undertaken after denuclearization is to reclaim China's illegal fishing rights and restore sovereignty over the management of fisheries resources. This is a roadmap for development strategies by sector in the fisheries industry as North Korea transitions to a market economy following denuclearization. 1. Development strategy for the fisheries industry. The short-term period of 0 to 5 years is dedicated to the modernization of fishing vessels and the restoration of resource sovereignty. The most urgent tasks immediately after denuclearization are the normalization of fuel supply for fishing vessels and the modernization of fishing fleets. Currently, 70 to 80% of North Korean fishing vessels are small wooden boats under 100 tons or aging steel vessels. They have high failure rates, and their navigation radius is limited to within 20 nautical miles of the coast. Introducing 300 to 500 medium-sized reinforced plastic fishing vessels ranging from 50 to 200 tons through the South Korean government's Inter-Korean Cooperation Fund or support from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization FAO could more than double the annual catch. In parallel with the reclamation of illegal fishing rights from China, a survey of fish stocks within North Korea's exclusive economic zone (EEZ) will be conducted jointly with the FAO and the Korea Maritime Institute (KMI). Based on the results of this resource survey, we will introduce a scientific total allowable catch (TAC) system and establish a fisheries management system to prevent overfishing from the outset at an international level. Regarding fisheries relations with Russia, Japan, and China, there are existing maritime boundaries and agreement systems. A key diplomatic task of the short-term fisheries strategy is to renegotiate these agreements after denuclearization and revise them under conditions favorable to North Korea. The midterm period of 5 to 15 years is a time for the modernization of the fishing fleet and the expansion of fishing grounds. The fishing area will be expanded from coastal to offshore fisheries through the introduction of medium and large fishing vessels ranging from 500 to 1,000 tons. A smart fishing vessel system will be established by equipping vessels with GPS, fish finders, and satellite communication. When integrated with Korea's vessel positioning system VPAS, it will enable simultaneous monitoring of illegal fishing and safety management. Specialization of fishing methods tailored to the specific characteristics of fish species in the East and West Seas will be promoted. Fishing methods will be modernized to focus on trawls and purse seines in the East Sea and bottom trawling, traps, and long lines in the West Sea. Fishermen's training centers will be established in Wonsan East Sea and Nampo West Sea, respectively, to raise the technical skills of fishermen to an international level. The long-term period of 15 to 30 years is a time for the parallel pursuit of sustainable fisheries and marine ecosystem protection. In the long term, the industrial structure will be transformed in a direction where fisheries decline and aquaculture expands. To prevent overfishing, we will legislate a quota system, a licensing system, and mandatory catch logs. We will secure a foundation for resource regeneration by designating major spawning grounds and habitats as Marine Protected Areas (MPAs). This serves as a condition for obtaining Marine Stewardship Council (MSC) certification and is essential for accessing the premium market. 2. Development strategy for the aquaculture industry. In the short term, we will proceed with the immediate restoration of existing aquaculture farms and the selection of strategic species. The number of fish species farmed in inland waters amounts to approximately 20, including North Korean carp, Chinese carp, rainbow trout, and mullet. The top priority in the short term is to urgently restore existing inland aquaculture farms and normalize the supply of feed and fry. In marine aquaculture, sea cucumbers, scallops, oysters, wakame, and kelp will be selected as strategic species. These species have low initial investment costs, short growth periods of 1 to 3 years, and high international market prices, enabling early foreign currency earnings. In particular, dried sea cucumbers trade at $100 to $500 per kilogram in the Chinese premium food market, making their profitability per unit area the highest among all aquatic products. We will designate the tidal flats of the Gangnyeong International Green Demonstration Zone and the waters off Rason and Chongjin as core aquaculture hubs and attract investment from Korean fisheries companies such as Dongwon, Haeju, and CJ Seafood, as well as Japanese aquaculture companies. In the midterm, we will introduce smart aquaculture, recirculating aquaculture, and complete aquaculture technologies. By adopting Norway's recirculating aquaculture system RAS, we can stably produce salmon, halibut, and pufferfish year-round on land. Since it does not rely on the marine environment, wastewater and disease management are easy, and production per unit area is 10 to 20 times higher than traditional aquaculture. Korea's Aquafarm, Norway's SalMar, and Mowi are candidates for technology partners. We will establish a large-scale seaweed farming complex in the southern part of the West Sea. Since wakame and kelp can issue blue carbon credits due to their carbon absorption effects, a new revenue model is possible that secures both aquaculture profits and carbon credit revenue simultaneously. Nori seaweed is a product experiencing explosive demand growth in the Korean, Japanese, and U.S. markets, and organically certified nori produced in North Korea's pristine West Sea environment allows for premium positioning. Although abalone farming requires a high initial investment, it is a high-priced seafood product worth $30 to $80 per kilogram, offering excellent profitability after 10 years. We are establishing a large-scale abalone farming complex in the Nasan Sea area by transferring abalone farming technology from Wando and Jeju, Korea. In the long term, we will integrate aquaculture clusters and supply chains. We will establish vertically integrated clusters centered on Ongjin and Sinpo in the East Sea and Gangnyeong in the West Sea, fully integrating aquaculture, processing, and export. By concentrating compound feed factories, fry production facilities, processing plants, cold storage warehouses, and export docks within the complex, we will minimize logistics costs and quality losses. The long-term goal is to transition to a structure where aquaculture accounts for more than 50% of the total fisheries production. 3. Strategy for the development of the seafood processing industry. In the short term, we will urgently establish freezing and refrigeration infrastructure. Currently, the biggest bottleneck in North Korea's seafood processing is the near-total absence of freezing and refrigeration infrastructure. Even when fish are caught, storage and transportation are impossible, resulting in most being consumed immediately locally or lost. This is the primary structural reason why increased catch volumes do not translate into profits. We will prioritize the construction of cold storage facilities with capacities ranging from 5,000 to 10,000 tons each at 6 ports: Rason, Chongjin, Wonsan, Hungnam, Nampo, and Haeju. South Korean companies Samsung C&T and Hyundai Engineering and Construction will handle the EPC engineering, procurement, and construction, and funding will be secured through the Asian Development Bank ADB Climate Finance, based on the premise that cold chain infrastructure contributes to reducing food loss. Simultaneously with the cold storage facilities, we will establish a road transport system for refrigerated container trucks that connects fishing vessels directly to the ports. In the midterm, we will expand production lines for high-value-added processed products. The core strategy for the midterm is to transition from simple frozen exports to processed exports. We will diversify our product range to include fresh chilled seafood for sashimi exports to Japan, frozen fillets for exports to China and Southeast Asia, smoked, canned, and dried seafood for exports to the US and EU, and salted seafood, fish cakes, and seafood snacks for the domestic market. We will apply HACCP hazard analysis and critical control points, Marine Stewardship Council MSC, and organic certification systems to seafood processing plants from the outset. Since entry into the US, EU, and Japanese markets is impossible without these certifications, certification consulting costs are covered by support from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization FAO and the Korea Fisheries Quality Management Service. The resource utilization of fishery byproducts, such as bones, internal organs, and shells, is also a midterm task. Byproducts will be fully utilized as resources, including producing fish meal for use as aquaculture feed and agricultural fertilizer, extracting fish oil for use as a raw material for omega-3 supplements, extracting chondroitin cartilage for use as a raw material for health functional foods, and using calcium carbonate from oyster shells for fertilizer and construction materials. In the long term, functional materials and bio-raw materials will be produced. We will foster a marine biomaterial industry that extracts alginate, carrageenan, and fucoidan from seaweed. Alginate is a high-value product valued at $15 to $50 per kilogram, used as a food additive, pharmaceutical capsule, and 3D bioprinting material. Fucoidan is a top-tier marine biomaterial valued at over $100 per kilogram, used as a raw material for anti-cancer functional health foods. Cientech Korea, Yamada Chemical Japan, and FMC Biopolymer Norway are candidate technology partners. 4. Strategy for the development of the seafood distribution industry. In the short term, we will reorganize domestic distribution networks and establish the foundation for a cold chain. Immediately after denuclearization, we will legally liberalize the domestic seafood market. We will legitimize seafood trading currently conducted unofficially in informal markets and guarantee fishermen the legal right to sell directly in the market. We will construct modern comprehensive seafood wholesale markets in Pyongyang, Wonsan, Chongjin, Nampo, and Kaesong. We will introduce 100 to 200 refrigerated container trucks to establish the first-ever cold chain distribution network from ports to inland wholesale markets. In the medium term, we will build export distribution networks and conduct brand marketing. We will establish export distribution networks to South Korea, Japan, and China. For exports to South Korea, the fastest method is to export fresh seafood via direct routes between Incheon Port and Pyeongtaek Port, or via car ferries between Nampo Port and Incheon Port. For exports to Japan, we will open direct routes between Rason Port, Chongjin Port, Wonsan Port, and Hungnam Port to Nagata Port to directly supply fresh seafood from the East Coast to Japanese seafood wholesale markets. Exports to China are supplied to the Shanghai and Guangzhou seafood. Wholesale markets via the Dandong-Sinuiju land route or the Rason Port Chongjin Port sea route. We will develop a DPRK Clean Ocean Origin brand and launch it in South Korea, E-Mart and Lotte-Mart, Japan Aeon, and the United States Whole Foods. This clean image, combined with the symbolism of the historic transition of the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, will become a powerful marketing asset. In the long term, we will integrate into global seafood distribution platforms. We will sign direct trade contracts with Alibaba's fresh food platform, Amazon Fresh and Coupang Eats, to supply North Korean seafood to the global direct-to-consumer D2C market. By introducing a blockchain-based origin tracking system, we will transparently disclose the entire process from fish farms to processing plants, ports, and consumers. This transparency is also a key requirement for MSC and ASC certifications. 5. Strategy for the development of the seafood export business. In the short term, we will focus on high-value items that can be exported immediately. Items that can be exported immediately after denuclearization include frozen squid, pollock, and sori for the Japanese and Chinese markets, fresh oysters, and fresh scallops for the Korean and Japanese markets, dried sea cucumbers for the high-end Chinese market, and seaweed and kelp for the Korean, Japanese, and U.S. markets. Since these items can be exported after initial processing without the need for processing facilities, the first foreign currency earnings from exports will be realized within 6 to 12 months following the denuclearization agreement. We will prevent dependence on the single Chinese market from the outset. We aim for a diversified export structure with 30% to Korea, 30% to Japan, 20% to China, and 20% to the US and EU, and adopt a multi-certification strategy to simultaneously obtain quality and hygiene certifications for each market. In the midterm, we will enter the premium markets of the US and EU. For exports to the U.S., registration of seafood facilities with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration FDA and HACCP certification are mandatory. To this end, we will receive support for the certification process by linking with the U.S. FDA's Technical Assistance Programs or through technical cooperation with the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety of Korea. The first sale of North Korean seafood in the U.S. market is not merely a commercial event, but a symbolic occasion where American consumers can tangibly experience the economic achievements of denuclearization. EU seafood hygiene certification is required for exports to the EU. While obtaining EU certification takes time, once acquired, it enables entry into 27 markets through a single customs clearance process. In the long term, we will pursue the advancement of the export structure and the maximization of the country of origin premium. We will gradually upgrade the export structure into 4 stages: raw material exports, primary processing exports, high-value processed food exports, functional material exports. The ultimate goal is an annual export value of $5 billion for North Korean seafood, which is 14 times the current total export value of approximately $360 million. Just as Norway earns $15 billion annually from seafood exports, North Korea can grow into a seafood powerhouse based on its pristine waters and specialty fish species. 6. Strategy for the development of the deep-sea fishing industry. In the short term, we will reacquire legal deep-sea fishing rights. Currently, North Korea's deep-sea fishing is effectively completely banned under sanctions. Immediately after denuclearization, we will acquire legal deep-sea fishing rights by immediately joining international fisheries organizations such as the West Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, WCPFC, the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, CCAMLR, and the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission, IOTC. The most realistic approach is to start with joint ventures with South Korean deep-sea fishing companies such as Dongwon Industries, Sajo Oyang, and Silla Trading. We will begin with a division of labor structure where South Korean companies provide vessels, technology, and sales networks, while North Korea provides the crew labor. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization (FAO) and the Korea Maritime and Fisheries Training Institute will support the international fishing skills training of North Korean crew members. In the midterm, we will establish an independent deep-sea fishing fleet. We will gradually introduce deep-sea fishing vessels ranging from 500 to 2,000 tons, including tuna long lines, squid jigging vessels, and trawlers. Funding will be secured through the Export-Import Bank of Korea's Inter-Korean Cooperation Ship Financing, loans from International Finance Corporations IFCs, and reinvestment of profits from joint fishing ventures. We will fish for tuna, squid, pollock, and cod in international fishing grounds across the Pacific, Indian, and Atlantic Oceans for export. Korea's deep-sea fishing development trajectory serves as the most valid reference model. Korea has a history of starting deep-sea fishing in 1957 and growing into one of the world's largest deep-sea fishing nations by the 1970s. In the long term, we will operate deep-sea processing factories. Operating 5,000 to 10,000-ton deep-sea processing factories will allow for immediate processing and freezing at the fishing site, enabling export to Korea, Japan, and the United States in a state of peak freshness. Processing vessels generate 3 to 5 times the added value on-site compared to simple raw material exports. We refer to the processing vessel models operated by Norway, Russia, and Japan. This is a financing plan for the development of North Korea's fisheries industry. For short-term Euro 5 years financing, fisheries infrastructure items will be explicitly included in the denuclearization economic compensation package jointly supported by South Korea, the United States, and Japan. Costs for modernizing cold storage facilities and fishing vessels will be covered through support provided by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, and the World Food Program, WFP, under the pretext of food security, and through the Asian Development Bank, ADB Climate Finance Cold Chain, under the pretext of contributing to reduced food loss and carbon reduction. For medium term, 15 years financing, direct investment by joint aquaculture enterprises of South Korean, Norwegian, and Japanese fisheries companies will be utilized. A self-sustaining virtuous cycle structure will be established by allocating 30% of seafood export revenue to a reinvestment fund for fishing vessels, aquaculture, and processing, and revenue from the sale of seaweed, farming blue carbon credits in the international carbon market will be used. For long-term 15 years and beyond, a fully self-sustaining fisheries revenue structure will be established, and a portion of the Sovereign Wealth Fund will be reinvested in the advancement of the fisheries industry once annual seafood exports surpass $1 billion. These are measures for cooperation with neighboring countries to develop North Korea's fisheries industry. In cooperation with South Korea, technology transfer is key. Joint fisheries resource surveys by the Korea Maritime Institute, the transfer of aquaculture technology by the National Institute of Fisheries Science, and joint ventures in processing and distribution technologies by South Korean fisheries companies constitute the most natural structure for cooperation. The establishment of a joint fishing zone in the West Sea is an agenda item already included in the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit Agreement and can be resumed immediately after denuclearization. In cooperation with Japan, fisheries in the East Sea are key. As Japan is the largest consumer of squid, pollock, and sori, concluding an agreement for the direct export of North Korean seafood from the East Sea to Japan is the fastest way to generate foreign currency revenue. Key cooperation items include resuming fisheries cooperation agreements with the Japanese Fisheries Agency and attracting joint investments by Japanese fisheries companies in aquaculture and processing in Rason. In cooperation with Russia, joint fisheries in the northern East Sea are possible. Russia already has a history of fisheries agreements with North Korea, and joint Russia-North Korea deep-sea fishing based in Rason could become a reality in the medium term. Cooperation with Norway is most valuable in aquaculture technology. As the world's largest salmon farming nation, Norway possesses world-class technology in RAS, smart aquaculture, and MSC certification systems. Free technical assistance can be obtained by linking with the Norwegian Development Cooperation Agency NORAD's support program for fisheries in developing countries. This is a plan for U.S. support for the development of North Korea's fisheries industry. U.S. support for the development of North Korea's fisheries industry is feasible, not merely out of humanitarianism, but when combined with concrete strategic interests. First, access to the U.S. market is utilized as economic leverage. If the U.S. applies permanent normal trade relations (PNTR) tariffs to North Korean seafood, exports of North Korean seafood to the U.S. become possible. The entry of clean North Korean seafood into the annual U.S. seafood import market, worth approximately $25 billion, benefits American consumers by providing a diverse and affordable supply of seafood. Second, we will apply the Fisheries Technical Assistance Programs of the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration (NOAA) and the U.S. Agency for International Development (USAID) to North Korea. NOAA has extensive experience in providing technical assistance for fisheries resource management to developing countries worldwide and can immediately participate in scientific surveys of North Korea's fisheries resources. USAID can conduct aquaculture and processing technical assistance projects under the pretext of food security. Third, we will package joint ventures by U.S. fisheries companies in North Korea as economic rewards for the implementation of denuclearization. If U.S. seafood companies such as Transocean, Sea Change, and Maruhani Chiro USA make joint investments in North Korean processing plants, these companies will become private stakeholders in the stabilization of U.S.-North Korea relations and form an economic lobbying force supporting the implementation of denuclearization. These are the optimal fisheries positioning principles for North Korea. The best strategy for North Korea's fisheries industry is to simultaneously pursue three principles, breaking away from single export dependence on China, creating premium brands, and vertical integration. Dependence on China, such as the illegal sale of fishing rights formed under current sanctions, must be decisively liquidated immediately after denuclearization. Instead, exports must be diversified to South Korea, Japan, the United States, and the EU, and direct entry into the international premium market must be achieved by obtaining all quality, hygiene, and sustainability certifications required by each market. Vertical integration refers to a structure where fishermen do not stop at fishing, but rather manage aquaculture, processing, distribution, and export through a single cooperative or a mixed state-to-private enterprise. Once this structure is completed, the fisheries industry will become North Korea's fastest and most stable source of foreign currency revenue. Although it receives less attention than tourism, it is a top priority industry where achieving annual exports of $1 billion within 5 years of denuclearization and $3 billion within 10 years is realistic, provided that financial resources and technology are invested. North Korea must combine South Korean capital, U.S. markets, and Russian resources into a single basket called the fisheries industry. In particular, the optimal scenario is to develop the West Coast Greenbelt connecting Haeju, Ongjin, and Gangnyeong, and the East Coast Blue Belt connecting Rason, Chongjin, and Wonsan as two major axes, thereby elevating North Korea from a mere source of raw materials into the center of seafood processing and distribution in Northeast Asia. Next time, we will talk about North Korea's mining strategy. Thank you.